so what is it about them? And it was like one of those really long sessions of my senior team together. And suddenly it dawned on me, how this came to me. This is actually one of my strengths is ideation, and see lots of different data points, and I can kind of pick out one and go, that's the thing. And I looked at them all and I said, you know that all of these people are painful introverts, right? And everyone on the team was like, oh, yeah.
If you've ever been in a workplace where you felt that your extroverted colleagues were maybe somehow favored, preferred, better suited to the role, then this conversation that I had with Chris Dyer is hopefully going to turn that on its head. Chris is a globally recognized company culture expert. He's an author. He's a keynote speaker. He's been named a top 50 voice in all kinds of subjects such as leadership, change management, global thought leader, leadership podcast. I could go on and on and on. Chris is also a member of the Forbes Business Council and a board executive for Fast Company. Now, Chris has worked with countless companies, including the one that he owned, to unlock productivity, performance, and profits with his 7-pillar strategy for culture. And we're going to talk about all about that in this podcast. We're also going to talk about the biggest leadership lessons that Chris has learned in his career. But the conversation really centers around introverts. Now, Chris is a self-confessed card-carrying extrovert. However, he shared a story with me when we first met last year about how introverts were some of his best performing employees and in an area that he didn't really expect. So during this conversation, we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about how they started to notice that as a company, what they did to ensure that they were optimizing their introverted talent, how they supported them, and in fact, just to turn the status quo on its head, how they took some of the traits of introverts and trained extroverts to be more like that, to be more effective in their roles. So I really hope that you enjoy this conversation. There is so much to learn from Chris, so I don't want to take up any more time giving him an intro. Dive in and please enjoy. Chris, good to see you. Thank you for joining me so early in the morning, your time.
It's not too early, but I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Emma.
You are welcome. So I think you're the first person that I have had on the podcast that I've already met in person. It's usually the other way around. So
you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I saw you in Nashville in December.
You're right. It has been in the reverse. You're right. It's usually the other way around.
It is usually the other way around. So this is nice. I feel like I already know you. You reached out about being on the podcast last year, and you said a really interesting thing when we first connected that I'd love to start with.
Sure.
And that is that you saw a certain area of your business that introverts really excelled at.
Yes. Yeah. And I think I put this in my latest edition of my book. We went back and looked at our customer service team. And so our goal was, we started doing like the NPS score, and we were like at 45 or 48 or something, which is pretty good in our industry. And we said, but how do we get better? And we set this intentional goal for all of our departments. Just how do you get 1% better? We didn't tell them 1% every day or 1% every week, or we just left it to them. Think about how to get 1% better. And each team kind of took their own little angle of how fast do they get 1% better, right? And with customer service, they started really diving into different things. But one of the cool things is they said, well, what makes a great customer service rep for us? And we didn't really know because our reps were very, very different. And so we went back and looked at, just sort of evaluated, who many criteria, stayed a long time, always had great customer scores, knew how to diffuse situation. We had this whole matrix, right? And then we decided, okay, well, these 10 people were our best customer service people. And so, of course, it's well, how do you go hire more of those types of people? And it was well, we can't hire clones, and it's not going to work for us to go hire people with the exact same college and the exact same this. I said, so what is it about them? And it was like one of those really long sessions of my senior team together. And suddenly it dawned on me, how this came to me. This is actually one of my strengths is ideation. I can see lots of different data points, and I can kind of pick out one and go, that's the thing. And I looked at them all and I said, you know that all of these people are painful introverts, right? And everyone on the team was like, oh, yeah. And like, it's actually kind of amazing that they're in customer service. In fact, 5 of them I had to convince to be in customer service because that wasn't where they wanted to be. That wasn't their main thing. And so, I had like kind of coax them out of operations or coax them out of research and say, you really would be good. You understand the product and all this. And turned out they were better listeners. They were better connectors. Now, I've had some really good extroverted customer service people too, but it just for us, like our top 10, they would all self-identify as introverts. And so we started that kind of creating this like superpower around introversion in our company. And then I can give you like that later on, we started to figure out what those traits were at what order. And then we were taught those things, everyone did.
I find that so interesting that, obviously you had the skill to say, hey, this person would be great and to move them from one department to another. But then those people that you'd seen something in them and handpicked them, they weren't convinced, but they went on to be, 5 of the top 10.
Yeah. I have this concept where I identified a lot of people on the way that I knew would be great leaders or I knew would be great in these positions. And so, but they don't see themselves that way. They have this particular thought process. They have this idea about themselves. And when you challenge that with a different position or a different challenge, they sometimes revolt or they don't want to do it. I'm reading this really interesting book right now. They're talking about how like introverts will say they don't want to do these certain activities that extroverts would love to do, but yet when they study them doing it and they study their reactions after, they have the same benefit. They have the same reaction that it's good. How they recover, how they regenerate and refresh is maybe different. But it's interesting that there's a story that a certain group of people are telling themselves about the interaction or about what's going to happen that maybe isn't necessarily true. And so the only way I could convince them to do this was, how about you just try this out part-time? Why don't you go be a part-time customer service person? Why don't you go be a part-time leader? And that gave them enough, okay, I'll try it, but I'm leaving them the promise of, if you don't like it, you hate it, and I'm wrong, you can go back to what you were doing before. And it's not like they have to just jump off a cliff and put all their faith in me that it's going to work out. They got to kind of put their proverbial toe in the water and see if it was okay.
That's exactly what I was thinking. This like dip a toe, this idea of being able to give it a go. And, I see this with clients and sometimes it's like, hey, you don't have to commit to this course of action or this business plan or this, whatever life change you want to make. But how would it feel to just give this part of it a go? And, usually people are like, well, yeah, I can do that. And then as soon as they've done that, it's like, oh, well, actually, that was easy. I think as an introvert, I can say there's a big part of the fear of doing something new is not so much the fear of it, but the fear of how exhausted I might feel after it. So I can see why you say those people are, introverts are less likely to be up for doing something different, but once they do, they enjoy it just the same.
Yeah. And it's again, it's that story that they're telling themselves.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the most common things of questioning that I have always had to say to people who were not progressing in their career, maybe not considering that opportunity, maybe not performing as well as they would have liked them to perform, maybe not getting along with their team or their boss or whatever. I think the habit is, well, other people need to change, or this situation needs to change, or this thing needs to be perfect for me to do this. And I'm always want to challenge people, like, what's the story you're telling yourself? Because maybe that's not reality. Maybe, just maybe you're not right about all of those details. Maybe you would do a great job and people would like you in that position. And so it's so important they think about that. And then the second question is like, well, what's your 50%? What is it, the part that you can control, that you can do, that you can be amazing at, that you can prepare for and do your best work and all of that? Maybe the rest of the world and everyone else in your life fills in the other 50% that you can't control. But it was really fascinating to me is how little people really put intentionality around the part they can control. And if we all just did a lot more of that, we would be a lot better.
I think that's where labels can be super helpful, but also a huge hindrance, because if someone gets too attached to the label of introvert in the wrong way of like, oh, it means I can't do it. It means I'm going to be tired. Oh, I'm not cut out for that. You can, like you say, tell yourself a whole story about it. I got very attached to the label of introvert because I was like, oh, I get it now. I get that my energy's different and I have to manage it different, but it's never stopped me from doing anything. It just means that I'm a bit more intentional with how I recharge.
Exactly. And so, maybe that post event is going to look different for you. So we were in Nashville together.
Mm-hmm.
I came back on cloud 9 and had so much energy, and all of the energy that I'm sort of like, I joke, I say it's almost like being a Dementor in Harry Potter, like sucking all of the energy out of everyone, right? And I come home and I have a big ball of energy that then I turn into work and I turn into action and success, right? Whereas maybe you might have come home and like laid under the covers for 2 days and had to get recharged and had to get yourself back into your flow and your routine, and then took those ideas and things and turned them into something. Yeah. So it's that post part that feels where the biggest difference is. And I'm sure you probably had moments that you intentionally took for yourself during that time in Nashville to be doing a little less people-y.
It was very people-y. Let's just give context. I think there were 200 people, something like that. It's very high energy, full on days, lots of lights, lots of stimulus, lots of learning, like great and high energy, but yeah, over a 3-day period, a lot for an introvert.
Right. So me being a card-carrying extrovert, you being an introvert, like I literally left the session and then went and had more conversation with people, came back to a session and then went to the bar to have more conversations with people, and then to go to a dinner, and then to go out afterwards to another bar to have more conversations with people. Like, so my sort of, experience is one thing. And I'm definitely over here on the spectrum. Proud
extrovert.
Yeah.
For me, it was, and like I've done enough of these type of things now to know, I had to take a pause midway. So I think the second day, it was like we had dinner after each day, right? It was the second day I went, I just need to go and order room service and sit in my room and, quiet and eat pasta and recharge, because I know we've got another full on day tomorrow. And then there was the gala coming up, and I was like, I just need to take a pause. And I remember talking to one of the guys on the way out, and he's like, no, like, you're here, don't waste the time. And I was like, if I don't, I'm just going to be exhausted for the rest of it. And I know my energy well enough now. I went, I ate pasta in bed, watched HBO. I was like, this is great. Had 12 hours sleep. The next day I was raring to go. And then, my energy was kind of refueled for those next 2 days. So it's great.
And you really figured out what worked for you. So to bring it back into context for your original question, how we asked our agents to spend their day, we made sure there were intentional moments for them to have those little bit of breaks, that they didn't have to be taking phone calls for 8 hours straight. They had blocked time to maybe do ticketing or to do other non-peopling, direct peopling things. And that really, really helped them. We also really were intentional across the company about meetings. And so we tried not to have like meeting-itis when like everything had to be a meeting all the time. And we were pretty rigid about like when were team meetings. We allowed a lot more impromptu meetings and sort of encourage. If you have an immediate problem, go have a very quick meeting. Have a 15-minute meeting about that. That's cool. You don't need to call an hour-long meeting because you have one question and a client asks one thing that could have been an email, could have been a Slack message. But like sometimes you need a little of that creative energy to kind of talk to people. Like, so we created these little events and things, but we also created large blocks and coached our people over and over and over again. You need to block time on your calendar where meetings are not allowed. The outside world cannot get to you, so that you can do your thing. And then when it's time for you to people, you can be magical. And just as true for extroverts, of like, you can't be on the phone all day talking to people. Sometimes you got to stop and actually do the freaking work, man. Like with my salespeople, like the opposite conversation, block time to get things done, block time to do the proposal, block because they'd be on the phone, they just talk and talk and talk and talk. And at the end of the day would hit and they hadn't actually done anything, right? And then talk to a lot of great people, have a lot of great conversation.
Something that I know a lot of my clients struggle with, and maybe you can talk to this as someone that's led a large team, is the worry of blocking out time, turning off notifications, they want to be seen as engaged because they are engaged. But equally, it creates this like work is everywhere because it's on my phone and I'm never taking time away from people and I've got to go to every meeting. And like you say, I'm on the phone for 8 hours talking to people. But you see the benefit of introverts managing their energy in that way. Did you see that reflected in better performance, in, higher happiness in the workplace? How did that show up?
So a couple areas, right? So we were trying to ensure that our NPS score went. And so by the time I sold the company at the end of 2021, our NPS score coming from our clients was 93.
Wow.
So over time, we saw that implementing the right people in those positions, and hey, maybe introverts as a strategy is not going to work in every company, every situation. For us, it really did. And the types of clients that we had and the people that we were working with, it worked really, really well. We also did not have like a litmus test that said, if you're not an introvert, we can't be in customer service. But we certainly were very open to, whereas I think maybe naturally people might be like, oh, you're not an extrovert. You don't want to talk on the phone with everybody. Like they might have not considered those people. So we saw that customer service scores went up. Certainly when we started doing this work, for me, I really changed the culture and became very intentional about thinking about these things and creating, kind of getting out my virtual machete and like clearing away the crap for people every single day. That was my job as CEO. It wasn't my job to solve the marketing, thing. It wasn't my idea. I didn't come up with the magic idea on the slogan. That's the kind of stuff I used to do. It was my job to figure out how to help marketing collaborate better, or how to have those intentional moments, or to ensure they had the resources they needed. Because when they did that, they came back with stuff that was 1,000 times better than what I would have come up with, because I cleared away the job. So when I started doing that, it really kind of made the shift in about 2 years, about 2 years of really changing the culture, where you could feel the organization operated in a completely different way. Vibe was totally different. Energy was different. The few people who didn't like that left, and we had a few more people that were awesome that came in, and it just really started popping. And from that point, we were our best place to work in 14 years in a row. And we were also the fastest growing company on Inc.'s 5,000 list 5 times. None of those things ever happened prior to me doing that. And so it's a real test. If you look at like real actionable things, we were making more money, we were growing. Our people were consistently reporting with outside third parties, that wasn't like we told everyone you had to say nice things on the scoring. Like they could have said whenever they wanted what these were big survey groups that they were consistently rating us in the top. And we were in the top category, top 3 year after year in the SMB market, the SMB category. And then of course, customers are saying that they're wildly happy. So all of that data to me said that what we were doing was working.
And you alluded earlier that you managed to distill down, rather than just introverts, what the traits were that was making these introverts so effective in that role. I have an idea what maybe a couple could be, but I'd love you to share.
So what we noticed was that extroverts, we just want to generalize here for a second. If we were to get on the phone and you were the client and you told me that you would just come back from Hawaii, an extrovert might say, wow, that's awesome. Hawaii. I just love Hawaii. And extroverts can start to make it about them, and they can start to tell you the time they went to Maui and what they did and this and that. Whereas we noticed that the introverts did calls when someone said, oh, you went to Hawaii, might ask them a different question. Like, well, what was the best part of the vacation? Or who went on the vacation with you? Or did you bring home something special? Or they might even say something like, how many days did it take you to recover from vacation? They asked me questions that went a little deeper. And we noticed that even though the extroverts were being authentic, they really did. They really were excited, and they really did want to share. That wasn't connecting with the client in the same way as those other questions were. And so we started taking those examples, those questions, and sharing with the whole team. We would pick out a few like calls. We started like recording all the calls, and we did not record the calls to go back and listen to them and tell people what they were doing wrong. So please don't ever do that. What we did is, what we saw a client reported, excellent scores, that they were happy with the outcome of the thing, that, and we knew there was a real issue. Then we would go back and listen to the calls and use them as like case studies and trying to pick up, well, what did that person do in that situation that was really beneficial? And then we might like play that for everyone, and it would show them what was that call like structure to look like. That person said this, and then we said these things, and they said this, and we said these things, and kind of gave everyone that knowledge to go, oh, that's not how I'm doing it. And I thought I was doing a great job, but this person's getting like top scores, and I'm getting okay scores. Let me go try that. Like, I could have asked them those questions. I said, that's not how I thought I'm doing it. And this came from, I had read in a book years ago, and had learned that the top sports team, the NFL was where I heard it, but this has been seen across many other sports. The top teams who generally win are in like the top championship or whatever. They're the elite group of teams. Their coaches consistently show them tape where they're doing the thing right. And think about it, because we tend to think about, the movies tells us that they sit in the film and they watch what they're doing wrong over and over and over again. They may be watching what the other team's doing, but they're watching what they did wrong to learn from it. It's actually the opposite. They show them how they did the block correctly, or how they ran the play correctly in the game, because then you remember that and you want to repeat that success, that positive thing that you did. We run this play. If I do it this way, I'm going to be successful. And it was the same thing with our customer service agents. If you ask these things, if you say these things, think about your conversation in this way, you're going to get a much higher score, and the client's going to be much happier.
I love that. It's that positive reinforcement. I know a lot of tennis coaches do the same, where the players that have really become world class study other players for many, many hours, but they study in what they do well. So they take in account all the time of like, what is this person doing that's allowing them to be, like you say, 1% better, to perform at 1% better, to win one more point in each game, which is all you need.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you talk about the 7 pillars of cultural success, one of them is uniqueness, which I love, because I feel like that really ties into everything you've said there about recognizing people are different. There are unique things within departments, within personalities that can work for us. Tell us a little bit about the other pillars and what you discovered in your time as a leader.
So when I was setting out on my journey to change the culture, the question I asked was, well, what is a great culture? What are we supposed to change it to? And I felt like what I was reading and hearing was a step down. So if you think about a ladder, like the higher you go up the ladder, the more strategic, the more broad it gets. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was lower. They were saying, well, you should be transparent, or you should be positive, but that wasn't explaining it to me at a level above that could give me a clear picture of what I'm trying to do. So as I was going through that journey, and I'm talking to people, and I'm reading all these books, doing all this research, and interviewing all these top executives, I did a podcast for 10 plus years, interviewing hundreds of top executives, kept hearing the same thing. And it was these 7 things. And what I realized was that best companies do these 7 things really well. The market leaders, and when they stop doing one of these things well, they tend to dip, they tend to fall, they tend to have a fall from grace, so they don't make as much money, or somebody else takes over, or whatever it is. So the 7 pillars are transparency, positivity, recognition, knowing how to deal with mistakes. You mentioned uniqueness, and then there's listening. So if organizations that can do those things really well, and there's how you do them with employees, there's how you do them with clients. So like the uniqueness pillar is, you better be able to uniquely say what your product or service is. You better be able to articulate what makes you different or special if you want to be able to go sell to clients. But you also need to go and really value what makes each employee unique or each client unique if you want to have a successful business long-term.
I think it's really interesting when we look at smaller businesses and they're very reluctant to niche down. And it's the opposite of that. Like you say, like if you can articulate what is special about your product and why it's different. Whereas it's so easy for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, in the early days to say, oh, I want to be just like that company. And look at all these companies that are doing really well. I want to make sure that I'm like overlapping all of these markets. When in fact, it's the having the guts to really niche down and say, nope, we do this thing and we do it really well. And we're unique because of that, that they're the businesses that skyrocket.
Right. And the good news is you can niche down, but you can also niche down multiple times. It's okay to make one segment of your customer base think that that's all you do while you think talking to another niche group and telling them that's all you do. You don't have to, there's ways to communicate it very specifically and directly to that group of people to make them feel like, we used to tell people, oh, we're the specialists in healthcare and this, blah, blah, blah. And then we turn around and go to staffing. We're the staffing staff. Right? But we were also being very specific and unique about our wording to what made them care about what we were doing. And it was true. And we really did have those specialized solutions and examples and clients, some of that. But like we knew we were really good in healthcare, we're really good in staffing, really good in certain verticals. And then we would go after those verticals first. Yes, we could help everybody. Yes, everyone could buy our stuff. But we knew like which groups of people we could really solve their problem, who were very profitable for us. We had one group that like getting them was a slam dunk, but they were low margin.
Yeah.
Like we knew we could solve their problem all day long. We can grow and get nice revenue gains. They're not very profitable clients. I think clients over here are really hard to get. Every time we get one of them, like that profit makes up for all the fact that only the other ones over here. And then we got more profit out of scale, out of now doing this much more business or 100% more business. They cost less, for that. So it was like profit at scale and all of that. But so that I think that's the thing that companies don't think about when they're worried about niching down, is that you can do it. It's sort of, this is a terrible example, but it's sort of like, you could date 5 people and one not tell them all. And you could literally say when you need to say to each 5. Right now, somebody going to get married, that's another problem. But like you could do that in theory and say that it could be that person that the other person needs 5 different times. And that's a silly example, but like you can do that in your business.
You can have that level of specificity for one person or one type of client, but don't date 5 people, honestly. No, don't do it. So you mentioned at the start of your answer to the last question, you said, when I realized I had to change the culture, were you brought in to change the culture, or was it a light bulb moment of, oh, the culture that I'm leading over is not working?
No, so it was my company, and I had started in 2001, just after 9/11. And, we started off with a few of us in our little building, and we kept growing and growing and growing and doing well. But when 2008 happened and we had that big recession, I lost 40% of my clients and I lost 40% of my receivables.
Mm.
And so I got everyone together. At this point, we're a big company, and got everyone together for a big meeting. And I said, hey, we've got to come up with ideas. We've got to figure this out. We've got to, come up with a way to survive this. We could be one of these companies that goes under. It's very transparent, very honest about where we were when the situation was. And they all stared at me and basically were like, let us know what to do, boss. And I've been very frustrated and upset by this. No one had any ideas. Nobody had, anything to say. They were just waiting for me to figure it out. Waiting for me. And then, about a few hours of being angry, and suddenly you catch your reflection in the mirror and you go, oh, it's me. I'm the problem. Like, I've literally been running this company now for 7 years where I'm the idea guy and everything comes through me, and they're all the doers, and they're great doers. But I've been the person, because I started the business and I was the one who knew how to run the business, teach everyone the business. And so, but we had never grown out of that. It was an okay way to start the business, but it was a terrible way to run a sophisticated business at that. And so I had to unteach myself, and I had to unteach them a lot of bad habits. And so what I started doing was just starting small, out of telling them when they would come in and ask me, hey, I've got this client, I want to do this thing. What do you think? Because they wanted me to give them my blessing or the idea or whatever. And even if I knew what the answer was, I would say, well, what do you think we should do? And then they would tell me, and I would say, great, go try and let me know what happens. Now, if they were going to do something illegal, if they were going to do something with harm somebody or was going to cost us, $1 billion, of course I would stop them. But like, there were times when I knew they were about to go make a $10,000 mistake and I had to let them go do it, because that's the only way I was going to change the culture of getting them comfortable with, they can make decisions. They understand. They may need to go collect more data before they can make a decision. That's fine. But like, I don't need to make all the decisions for them. I want to empower them to make decisions. And I also want them to understand and know that this is a safe place for them to make a mistake. And as long as they come back and they're honest about what they tried and what happened and what were the results, and are willing to talk about it with their team or whoever about what happened and what could we do differently next time to create a better outcome or not make that mistake or to learn from that. Create a process, create a document, create a learning, something so nobody else goes through that. And that was the only way we made the shift and survived and then flourishing out of that time.
So last question to wrap up, which I think ties in perfectly to this. I was looking at my client roster, and all of my clients are leaders in some capacity, whether it's as entrepreneurs, whether it's in corporate, anywhere between 1 and 30 people on their teams. If you could go back to Chris on his first day in a leadership role and give him one piece of advice now that they could learn from, what would it be?
Well, geez, if I go all the way back, I think I talked out of my mom as a leader. I was probably trying to stop her to do. I don't generally believe like people are born leaders, but like I don't ever remember not being in charge of things.
Were you the bossy kid at school? Were you like leading your friends around?
Bossy, but I'd be like the one like, hey, who wants to play football? Let's organize a thing. And like, I'd just be like kind of I'd be the spark to get everyone to do like bossy, like, oh no, you have to do this. We have to play basketball or whatever. But I was the one like, oh, you guys want to play basketball? I'll organize, okay, the 2 teams. And I would just immediately jump into that role. How do I help us do the thing that everybody wants to do?
Mm.
But if I think like in a work context, a little bit later in life, one of the things that I had to learn, and actually I did this in 2018. So I read a book called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. It's a great book. She's the one who does all the writing, like Grey's Anatomy,
Scandal, and
all these other shows that I refuse to watch with my wife. But she's a great writer, and she's obviously a huge success. And in the book, she essentially says, her friends and family laughed at her that she always says no to everything. All of these other opportunities. She's wildly successful, and yet she was probably going to say no to visiting the White House to get an award because it was just too much for her. And so she decided for an entire year, she was going to say yes to everything. Now, of course, there's a funny Jim Carrey movie about this. There's actually an old British story that kind of comes from that. And we know in improv that saying yes is the only way that the scene continues. So I had heard my wife listening to this book on Audible, and I was so fascinated by it that I went and listened to it. And I decided I was going to say yes for an entire year. So I could tell you all of the things that happened out of that, but I would say that I used to be a little bit more protected and closed in when people would come to me with things. I'm just, I've already tried that. We're not going to do that. And I could start to cut them off because I was busy and I had a lot to do. And it was like, oh, here comes that employee. Every employee at week 3 always has this idea. And yet by me cutting them off at that point, I was creating this long-term thing of them not feeling comfortable to come to me with ideas and not to share what they were thinking, even though maybe at that moment it was very immature of where they were at in their career. I had to find ways to say yes. Yes, and yes, but tell me more. How do I facilitate that thing? Even if all my job as a leader is just to pull it out of them and then go put it on the shelf, doing more of that has been absolute magic when it comes to everything that's ever been good in my career, is to say yes, pull it out of people, to be interested, even if I already know exactly what they're going to say, even though we tried that, I know that's never going to work, but just to be that person to say, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Because I will say a few times people come up with a fresh perspective and a fresh way to solve a challenge that I never saw. And I was wrong about that. Rarely, but sometimes, and then it's enough time that's worth it. So long story longer, say yes. That was what I would certainly tell my younger self.
I love it. I think it's perfect to wrap up. I will drop the link to that book in the show notes as well, because it is a fantastic book. Chris, I'm going to put all of your links in the show notes too. So if anyone wants to come and connect with you, find out more about what you do, read your books, etc. But just for anyone listening while they're out driving or walking the dog, where's the best place that they can connect with you online?
I would love to connect with them on LinkedIn. I certainly do a lot there. I think this only works in the US and Canada, but if anyone's listening and is there, or you could text 33777 and my name, Chris, is the message, and I will send you a free thing about how to ask better questions to your employees, how to have better meetings, kind of cool document that I put together, happy to send. And if you are not in a place that can get that, you connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me for that. I'm happy to share it with you directly there.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for coming and sharing all of your experience and wisdom with us. It's lovely to chat to you as ever.
Yeah, well, good to see you again.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling expanded to what's possible for you, motivated to take action, and inspired about how you can start to own your energy. I share even more tools and resources on my Introverts Only email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the Ambitious Introvert products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of introvert-friendly inspiration. Sign up now at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes. See you next week.